Yeah.
Elaine,
Yeah,
perhaps
right.
somebody you
I agree.
can hear for the
I was just saying that to Miriam, I feel like I'm too off-center. Yeah, that's
I
what
don't
the
have
last
any
meeting
issue
too. I
with
was,
You're too far to the right.
No, I just thought I'd personally refuse. I thought it would be the right way to do it.
Sure,
I didn't have
we
to.
definitely won't give you a demerit for asking.
oh, you don't have to
Next time
sit
I'll
on it.
call you first.
You're welcome to.
I have my own, thank you.
You've got, yeah.
You know,
This feels weird.
Yeah?
It's on this side.
It's your,
What are you, chairman of the board? No, I mean,
No.
Well, it looks like Beth wasn't in the center.
I don't know, 15 years or something.
It's actually well centered. Yeah.
That's what I sort of threw off my sense of balance.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
you can come share the center.
I'm not impressed by anything under 30 days.
Yeah, and how about yourself?
Yeah, that's my
I
point.
put it a little bit. It's a little straighter, it's a little different color. Yes, I always have that. I had a meeting.
Just forget these in advance.
I did that like, it made a.
No, it's on. That one's not. The red one's on.
I just didn't know if I did the wrong button or something because it made
Is
a
that
noise.
my
when
name
I
placed
pushed the
there?
other side.
Yeah, I switched them.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. I was trying to figure out who I was.
Right? You can either be Ed or Beth.
Yeah.
And they gave us all the plans. Oh, did you even take a look at all the plans, or you knew you were gonna
No,
choose?
I opened them up and I just kind of skimmed them, whatever that's the right word. And then I said, okay, package that up. Probably will go over it at the next one review, which is in a couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, it's here.
I ran across. Long correspondence, email correspondence.
You were waiting for that to happen? What does it say?
I don't remember from when it was, maybe.
It's still off?
years ago.
Okay, so it still says like 7:27 or something.
And it apparently got to do with
Oh.
Mars class.
Okay, well then we're gonna go by Verizon time. I have 7:32, yeah.
Well, they finally took that
Thank you. Okay.
clock is on.
I think there used to be a clock over there.
Yeah, and he said it's down here, but he said it's even more off than it is.
Microphone.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board, town hall, and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually indicating that this meeting would take place at the town hall at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, February 6, 2019. Roll call.
Jane Becker,
Here.
Cheryl Burstein,
Here.
Diane Agro,
Here.
Gaston Halbert,
Here.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Here.
Joseph Steinberg,
Here.
Mark Matzel,
Here.
Casey Goldenberg, here, Vice Chairman Maria
Here.
Carolyn Betzel.
Here. Thank you. And we have one set of minutes from the January 16th meeting, which we received to review yesterday. I believe some initial comments were provided, and so, I mean, we didn't get a second version, but you have the comments that were said. Great, thank you.
They were on page 3, line 109, added, the school holds various events for parents and grandparents, that was added. And then on the following line, the school would like to replace the current grass field with an artificial turf field, added the word artificial, and then added, which would allow them to utilize the field more often, and I struck out in order to be able to use it more. And that was it.
Okay, did anybody have any other comments on the minutes? Okay,
I move their adoption.
Second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Minutes from January 16th have passed. No memorializations tonight, and before we get into the application that we're here to hear tonight, I'm going to announce formally that application number 18013, the Pingree School that we heard at our last meeting, and was being carried. This is the public notice that the matter is being carried to March 6th, 2019. No further notice will be required, I believe. Is that accurate?
Correct, and the new members will notice they have large packets on their plans.
We need to just say the time and place.
The time is 7:30 PM. The place is Town Hall in Millburn Township. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Without further ado, yes.
I'm afraid I have to recuse myself because I sit on the board of Greenwood Gardens, so I think it's absolutely mandatory that I recuse, so good luck with everything.
Thank you, Joanne, for coming out
Have a good
to
night.
join in the beginning. And thank you for your volunteer service.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that said, we're going to begin application 18017, Greenwood Gardens.
Yes, good evening. Gary Hall with the law firm of McCarter and English in Newark. We're here for amended approval. I hate to admit it, but I was here 10 years ago when we got the original approval. It's an amended site plan, no variances. There may be a lighting waiver. We'll get to that, but and actually, I believe we're eliminating a parking variance that was granted previously because we're adding parking. So I think it's a pretty simple application. It's a good use. It was approved before to do some work to open it to the public. That's now open to the public, and this is adding more parking and reconfiguring the driveways a little bit. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. And without further ado, I'd like to call the head, Abby O'Neill.
Yeah.
Ask for completeness purposes.
Right, and so there is a waiver, I apologize for just one moment. There is one waiver request for the completeness of the EIS, I believe, as we saw in your checklist.
Oh, okay, yeah, if you want to
So
do
if you
that
could
first.
address that
Yeah, sure.
first, and then we can proceed once we,
Okay.
if we take the vote to approve to hear.
Oh, okay.
as
The,
such.
yes, as I said, it's been here before. The changes are rather minor and minimal, I think, so I think it's, there's no need for a detailed environmental report of any kind. So, is that,
So that is the testimony with respect to an EIS waiver request.
I mean, our witnesses can provide more in response to questions, but I think it's the scope of what's being proposed. It's really just changes to existing improvements. The parking is being added, one where a swimming pool was, and the other where there's a parking already, a former tennis court, and there's just a little driveway relocation. So the changes to the site are de minimis, and they all involve existing developed areas. There's no development of any undeveloped property on this 20-some acre parcel.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm just gonna ask the board if anybody feels that they would like to hear more testimony or feels comfortable with what we heard, to approve the request for the EIS waiver. Do we feel confident that we are comfortable proceeding? Or does anybody feel they would like to hear more?
I would be comfortable proceeding.
Okay, I as well.
There was an EIS done previously, right? So, or there's no EIS done, so there's a stormwater report, there's
The
soils
stormwater
report.
report and other reports, but what we just heard was that the reason for the request to waive an environmental impact statement is because the area which is projected or recommended to be paved is currently used for other uses, as he just described.
Okay.
So the de minimis impact is what he's saying is the reason.
And as we go along, you can ask any questions you want of our witnesses. And as Mr. Buzak will say, granting the waiver is only completeness, it doesn't preclude any information you may choose to request once we get into it. So you're not limiting your options. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I
but-
think that's true, and I think if the board is comfortable with that, we should entertain a motion to waive the checklist requirement for
So moved.
the EIS.
Second.
Voice vote?
Voice vote is?
Voice vote's good.
Yep, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So we
thank
will
you. Now I'll
eventually
call
take the
Abby
vote.
O'Neill.
Thank you.
And I don't know, the two swears are in, but come on up here and I'll get out of the way. And you'll need to be sworn in by somebody. I'm not sure who.
I do. Sure. Abby O'Neill, ABBY, O apostrophe N-E-I-L-L.
And just just to start, can you tell the board what your affiliation is with Greenwood Gardens?
Sure, yes. I'm the executive director. Been the executive director for just a little bit over a year. And thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about Greenwood Gardens with you.
Yeah, that's my other question is just, can you give them a brief explanation of who Greenwood Gardens
Okay.
is and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Well, Greenwood Gardens it's first and foremost, it's a nonprofit organization. It is a public garden that was open to the public in 2013 after more than a century of being held privately or being owned privately by two families predominantly. Today, we have visitation of approximately between 5,000 and 6,000 people a year. The goal is to expand that, why we're interested in adding a parking lot. That's part and parcel of an extensive strategic plan that was completed by the organization in 2016. So at this point, we're executing on that. And we exist through membership in the community, volunteer programs, paid programs, visitation, and donations of private individuals and foundations. Our programs really are probably the biggest manifestation of what we do as an organization. We exist to educate, entertain, and in the words of our mission, to connect people with nature in an historic garden oasis, and that's really what we are. We have terraced gardens, we have woodlands, we have grottos, we have a beautiful tea house, all built back in the early part of the 1900s, and we interact incredibly as deeply as possible with the community. We do, as I said, education programs that are in horticulture, and we do entertainment in the garden. I don't know if any of you have ever attended the jazz picnic, but there's that. We do chamber concerts. Every year we do a very large Bees, Birds, and Butterflies Day, where this past year we had approximately 450 people come, largely children with parents and grandparents, to undertake educational activities out in the garden. It was completely low-tech and high-touch, which was very nice. And in the past, we've done a History and Harvest event that has attracted 1,000 people. We also have some nice partnerships with Newark Academy. Seniors who have a requirement for community service come and work with us on projects for 2 weeks out in horticulture projects. We also have a program with the Millburn High School that is called, I have to give you the name of it to get it right. It is called Read, Weed, and Write. And it's for 9th grade English classes who spend time in the garden doing poetry and writing, and it's a great way to do that. We're particularly proud of our volunteer organization. It's very active, and in fact, last year, the Green Team, which is a part of our volunteer organization, received the PSE&G Stewardship Award Medal at the 2018 New Jersey State Governor's Jefferson Award ceremony in Trenton. That was in recognition of the 1,000 hours that they donated over the year to help us with all kinds of projects in the garden. We really couldn't exist without the help of our volunteers. And in fact, this body gave our group a proclamation recognizing this honor last year. So
It's probably the township committee, not the planning.
oh,
board.
sorry,
This
I'm
is the
sorry,
planning
wrong
board.
body. I'm
But
sorry, but
I'm sure you go on and on,
yes.
but I don't know, in the interest of time, if people have specific questions,
Sure.
maybe.
And I have some
you can catch
materials.
your breath.
Yeah,
Or if you have
sorry.
more you wanna
I
say,
have
that's
materials
fine.
if you want. I have a postcard that shows some of our current programs, a recent newsletter, just to give you a flavor. I can leave that with you if you would like.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you, not right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I then call our engineer, Edward Capolaro.
I do. Edwin Caballero. Edwin Caballero.
Is that okay to use?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, you're the project, well, first, what's your background and qualifications? You're a licensed PE, is that correct?
I work for Mazer Consulting. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have 35 years of experience preparing site plans and subdivisions, and I have appeared before numerous planning boards.
Okay, I don't go overboard. If you
So
have
you're offering
questions-
testimony as an engineer?
Yes,
Yes.
as a licensed professional engineer of the state of New Jersey.
Thank you.
Yes.
for your
Okay.
consent.
So you prepared the plans that are before the board tonight?
Yes, I did.
And I think actually your firm, not you per se, prepared the ones 10 years ago, is that correct?
That's also correct.
Okay. Why don't you just run through what's proposed, the highlights? Now, I see you've got an exhibit up. Is that something that is in the set of plans everybody got?
The first sheet is the existing conditions plan, sheet number 2 of 11. And
Why don't you read the date? I think everybody.
Why don't we just mark it, A-1, and people can look at their package.
It's kind of hard to read from a distance, I know, so if you have your own, it's probably easier, but, and while you're there, why don't you identify the next item and mark it as A2 and tell us what that is? That's colored, so I don't think people got that. Right?
the second drawing is called a landscape plan. It's dated February 6th, 2019. And it's basically the same as the landscape drawing within the section.
Yeah, it's colored, so they didn't have that version.
Do you have the sheet that was in the plans, if it's the same, just uncolored?
Oh, I don't know.
Is sheet 12?
Looks like it.
Yeah, you did that.
It's a variation, I think, of the plan sheet. It's based on the
Okay.
plans, but it's not identical. It's
Fine.
more than
That's
just
fine.
colored.
Okay.
I have, I don't know if you want, I have page size, if that helps to hand out.
Yes,
Oh,
please.
yes.
We can hand them out and, hopefully there's, I think I
It gives you the,
12,
but
and if we run out, we can give you more.
This is also A2.
Is this A2?
Yes.
Yes, it's,
Okay.
yeah, the colored one is just page size instead of the mounted one, and just, we can mark one for the file. Sometimes people prefer, I think both exhibits that people have made. Oh, no, there's another one. I'll give that to the secretary to, oh, there's two here.
Yeah.
Oh, there's three here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's A2. And there are two more, if anybody wants one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go back to what's marked as A1. I think you wanted to, that shows the entire property, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, why don't you orient the board, I'm sure they're familiar with it, but where it is and what's around it.
Alrighty. On the left or the west side of the page is Old Short Hills Road. To the north or the top side of the page is Short Hills Park. To the right or the east direction is the South Mountain Reservation, and then just to the south is some existing residential lots.
Okay, and then if you quickly go to the other one, A2, and that doesn't show the whole property, is that correct? A2.
That's correct. Basically, A2 shows the realignment of the access drive into the proposed new parking lot.
Okay, and this shows the part of the property where anything would happen now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, the other one shows the larger property that, why don't you put A1 back up and sort of point out what the focus is on A2, if you could more or less highlight that area, just visually, so people know what we're.
Yeah, basically, the proposed parking lot is in the northeast corner. If you're basically coming around the access drive, it goes in the pool area and then continues in the previous tennis court area. So it's basically as far from Short Hills Road as it could be.
So the improvements are basically the right half of that property at most.
It's
Yeah.
basically the small section on the right-hand side of
And there's no changes to any other part of the property, is that
it.
correct?
No, there's-
Okay. All right.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
Do you have questions while we're on that drawing, and then we can go to probably the colored one to show where you're working? Or, why don't you put up A2 then, and walk us through what is changing, what's proposed to be done here?
Alrighty. Basically, we're here for an amended preliminary and final site plan. We are in the conservation, educational, cultural zone. The site plan drawings are dated, the engineering drawings are dated November 28th, 2018. The total tract for the parcel is 27.6, basically 6 acres. For the site itself, per the zoning ordinance, the maximum building coverage is 2.7%. Currently, the site is at 1.88%. In regards to maximum impervious coverage, the ordinance allows you to go to 18%. The site currently is at 13.9%. With our proposed improvements to the parking lot, we increase the impervious coverage slightly. We go to 14.7%.
And I
That's
think,
an increase of 0.22 acres.
and those numbers appear in a zoning table on the cover sheet. You don't have it up there,
Yes,
but that the board should have. Sheet 1 of 1 is the cover sheet,
Yes,
and it has a zoning table with the numbers you just mentioned.
that's correct.
Okay. And actually, while we're on that, I know we don't have it in front of you, but we did talk earlier. We determined there's one typographical error in that zoning table with the S to parking. It says bus parking, but that should be handicapped. Well, why don't you explain? I think they got merged maybe. Why don't you, the handicap requirement, why don't you, well, this says buses, 2 required, 2 existing, and 4 provided. Bus parking. What's the story with that?
Requires 2 bus handicap parking spaces. There's already 2 existing bus parking spaces on site.
Yeah.
We're not proposing any additional bus parking spaces.
And I don't think
So
they're,
that, it's the last line item within the zoning table.
and they're not called out on the plan. Can you point out where on A2 the bus parking spaces would be?
Yes, basically, the 2 parking spaces would be in the existing access drive to the carrier house.
And when I went back and looked, they were on the plan from 2008, they were shown in that location dashed out, and apparently they weren't included on the current set of plans. But it's the same as designated before, you're not changing, and requirements 2, and you're staying with 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, did you say handicap bus
No, no,
spaces?
that was me.
Okay.
I think they got
No, you said
blended.
handicap spaces, and your witness said handicap bus spaces, so then I didn't
Oh,
know if there
okay,
were
I'm sorry.
special buses, so I just wanted
No.
to get this straight.
Just on the buses, go through it one time. The requirement is
2 buses are required by the ordinance.
2 bus
We are
parking
providing
spaces.
Parking spaces.
Okay.
And we're providing
And you're not changing location or number? Okay. Now, let's go to handicap spaces, which I think, can you show them on A2 where they are?
Yes.
And first, I'm sorry. How many are there currently?
There are currently 4 handicap spaces,
And you're gonna add 2, is that correct?
adding 2 spaces.
Okay, and that meets any requirement?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, why don't you show us where they are on A2, if you would?
Basically, in front of the mansion, in the southern corner of the turnaround, you have 2 existing handicap spaces. Then as you go to the east, you have the existing parking lot, and basically at the end of the existing southerly parking lot, you have 2 existing handicap spaces, and you also have 2 handicap space aisles. So we added 2 additional handicap parking spaces on the opposite side for a total of 6 spaces.
And are those spaces marked on that A2 drawing?
Yes, they are.
Okay, but I think they're also on the site plan drawings that
Yes,
you
they are.
prepared as well on, probably sheet 4, I think, is the site plan sheet.
That's correct.
Or site plan layout plan sheet 4, which everyone should have. And so on the existing parking lot, the 2 proposed ones are bolded,
Yes.
and the 2 existing are there, but they're not in bold. Is that the only change you're making in that parking area that's existing?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure everyone can see that before we move on.
So I see 2 here. I don't see the other ones on the picture. Am I on the wrong sheet?
Yeah, on
I have
site
4.
plan on 4 of 11.
I see 2 over here.
I also do not, see.
I see.
Yeah,
There are 2 here, and
They're
then
in
there's
the
the 2 that
lower,
are existing.
lower left corner.
Yeah, there's
They're
2.
kind of hard to see because nothing's
Those
changed.
are true. And there is no.
And where are the, you said 6 there will be.
Why don't you have the witness fold, you show them on the big drawing, number 4.
Yeah, you can see it. Ed, why don't you go back,
You can't
Ed,
find.
go back to A2 and point out exactly where they are, because I think
5, 6.
they do show up on there, aren't they labeled?
All the way on the left-hand side of the sheet, you
Yes.
have the existing Blanchard's house, and just to the south, you have.
Oh, I see.
Thank
Here,
you.
Here.
Oh, okay.
And then as you proceed
1,
to the
2.
east, you have the 2 existing spaces at the end of the southerly
Okay,
parking lot.
understood, thank you,
And then adjacent to that, 2 proposed handicap spaces.
thank you.
Okay, so we covered the parking. So while we're on parking now, why don't you show us, can you explain what's being added parking-wise? What aspect is changing there by reference to A2, if you would?
In regards to parking,
Yeah,
the ordinance requires 86 parking spaces.
Oh,
We're
yes,
proposing a
so
total
here we go,
of
1, 2, 3,
93
4.
parking spaces. Within our proposed parking lot, we have 53 spaces total. There's existing 66 parking spaces currently on site, and with the proposed improvements, we have 27 spaces, so a total of 93 spaces on the site.
and on A2, the parking area, the large parking area, what's there now?
Basically, there's an existing pool.
Why don't you point that out, because,
The existing pool is located within the first section of the parking. And then, toward the northeast, there's an existing tennis court, which basically the second parking lot covers.
but that area was approved and striped for parking 10 years ago, is that correct?
It was used for valet over
Okay.
overflow parking now.
It was counted, it was there,
Yes.
and it was shown for parking. Okay. Now, is there access change to that parking area? How does that work?
Basically, we came off the existing drive coming in a easterly direction, and we basically reconfigured the access drive to get to the proposed parking lot. We had sent a field to Loudon Field, and we had located all and east side is where we wanted to, and that's where the configuration came in. We tightened the parking lot basically over the top of the existing pool, and then we rotated in a northerly direction to be over the top of the tennis court. That allowed us to minimize the impact to remove of any existing trees to keep it to a minimum.
But that's being repaved,
Yes.
it's tennis court paved now, but you're gonna redo that, you're not just, it's saying, okay. And currently, is there an access driveway from the far end of that parking area? Tennis
That
court?
access drive was from the north side coming to the south, and to access the tennis courts, and that would be removed.
Okay. Because the access on the other side isn't there today, is that correct? Because there's a swimming pool in between?
Correct.
Okay. And while we're on that, point out the intersection that's gonna be reconfigured a little bit and tell us why, if you would.
Basically, again, we have the existing parking lot in the south corner, and what we did was we realigned the parking lot in order to give you a T intersection. There was a prior issue where, as you're coming in the existing drive, there's an existing stone wall around the inside corner of the parking lot, and it gave you a little bit of a bad sight distance to come out. So what we did was we shifted the drive away from that stone wall in order to give you better sight distance to come out of the parking lot.
Okay. So that was realigned, we went through the handicap spaces. Now, are there some steps and a stairway that you've added in that area of the property?
Have it as asphalt.
Yes.
Used to be.
Why don't you point that out, if you would?
Basically, as you start entering the proposed parking lot, basically on the south side, we did a 45-degree section of steps to transition the grade to maintain the existing woodlands that we have on the south side of the parking lot. And we proposed a meandering path to be set in the field to basically go through and minimize, again, the disturbance to any of the trees to go through.
So that would provide access over to the buildings from the parking?
That provides access to the upper parking lot.
Right.
We also added a sidewalk on the north side of the access drive, which you can utilize to come to the carriage house on the
Okay.
lower section of the site.
All right. Now, while we're on that, the other change on the, I call it the top, the driveway coming in from Old Short Hills Road, is there a little thing you've done there, ticket booth, I believe it is?
Yeah.
Explain that,
basically
if you would.
What we added was a 4-foot wide by 6-foot long ticket booth. That ticket booth is basically set like 1,550 feet plus or minus from the center line of Old Short Hills Road. So there's quite a distance you have to come into the site in order to get to the ticket booth in order to access the park.
And at that point, somebody could find out where to park or whatever, and,
You would be instructed as soon
Okay.
as you have your tickets where to, and direct you to where to go to.
okay. So you widen the driveway, the road there at that point a little bit, okay, for that, okay. Now, what about stormwater? Did that cover the physical improvements on above ground, shall we say?
Yes, I believe.
Okay. What about stormwater management? How's that
Can
going?
we just pause to just ask questions about this section?
Excuse me,
while we're on
that's however
I
you,
would like-
that
I
makes, that
prefer to
probably
do
makes
that.
sense.
Does anybody have any remaining, I know there were some questions about where was the tennis court and where were the handicap spots. Are we comfortable to proceed, or does anybody have any?
Just one question, are you physically moving, I know where the ticket booth is, are you physically moving it further,
It would be a new ticket booth,
in the same not in the same location?
not in the same location.
Will that affect when people come to take their kids to the sports area? You know, people drive to the parking lot to take their kids for soccer?
Basically, there's
Maybe you go back to A1 and that would show how far away it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the area she's talking
As you
about.
come off of Old Short Hills Road, you come in, and there's the existing parking lot for parking.
The parking lot is a township property.
Right.
Yeah.
Before-
Just beyond that, there's an existing gate
Yes.
for access to the garden.
And where's the ticket booth going?
The ticket booth is going another 950 feet south of that location.
Okay.
So there'd be no queuing and
No.
cars on the, off our property, the Greenwood property, okay. Which
Okay.
may or may not occur now, but,
Got it.
so there's no gate at the property line now, is that, there won't be, or will there be?
Yeah, no, the gate remains.
But it'll be open when you have an event, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that covers it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question, because education is such a common feature
On
of.
sheet number 4, it's up there.
Thought about increasing.
Yes, up here somewhere.
Right there.
Right where my finger is.
For buses, because you only have 2 bus spaces, so say as you grow.
Abby, do you want to come up and, did you hear the
Right.
question? Maybe that's for her, not the engineer. I mean, if you were asked to address that, you say, if you know the answer.
I mean, I think they had looked back at the history of where the park was going and how many buses they needed. And it seemed at the time they thought that 2 buses was still proper in order to go through for the park.
Well, so it's a good question, first of all. As I understand it, again, I've been here for now just over a year, so I haven't actually witnessed a situation where we've had a bus tour. But the goal is, and historically what has happened, is buses are used to transport people, a group, some kind of affiliated group, whether it's a garden group from a garden club from some other part of the state, or a senior group, or a group of students, whatever. They come to actually tour the garden. It's not so much to take advantage of a program so much as it is to have a tour of an historic site. So in terms of buses coming, those would typically be scheduled. And they'd be scheduled, at various points, and we could only accommodate, a certain amount. Anyway, it's not a large enough site to have multiple buses, so that's plenty. Does that help? Does that answer what you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more on the physical improvements above ground? We can move
One
on.
more question?
One more question.
Sure.
Have you considered, or would you consider putting a couple of EV stations, plug-in stations?
Can't hear you.
Would you consider a couple of plug-in EV stations, because a lot of people are buying for electric cars?
Electric vehicle charging stations, yeah, that's the question.
Is it in the name of sustainability?
I'm sure it'd be considered. It's not part of this project, but,
I can address
It-
that when the time's right.
oh, okay. Why don't you come up
He's
and
gonna
be
address
sworn
the
in and
electric
address
vehicle.
it now while we're on the topic? I mean, that's fine.
I do. Alan Summers, ALLANSUMMERS. I'm a registered landscape architect in Pennsylvania. My partner is a registered landscape architect in New Jersey who couldn't be here tonight.
And your firm, including
Mhm.
your partner, did the landscape plans that are,
Yes,
the
it's been
plans
a
that-
collaboration with Ed in terms of organizing the site as well as doing the landscape plans and working on the lighting.
Okay, that's fine, because he's not a registered.
Right now, I
landscape
don't know.
New Jersey's okay, if you're
He's just
responding to the
answering,
question, then that's
he's
fine.
not appearing as an expert, he's answering
no, he's
the
appearing as a
question regarding-
representative of the people who
is
did
fine.
the
That's
landscape plan. He's familiar
Right.
with the project. And
Understood.
Yes.
he doesn't have to express a landscaping opinion, but.
Well, we did look at the charging stations as part of the parking. The issue is the amperage that's required for that is very difficult to attain on the site with the existing utilities. So although we tried to incorporate the charging stations, the electrical engineer said it wasn't possible.
Panasonic Information is doing, photos that was.
If there's new technology, I'm certain the garden would be interested in incorporating it, because this was an issue that was raised early on in our planning and something that we're all I'm LEED accredited professional as well, and the garden, of course, is interested in sustainable technology. So if there's an opportunity to incorporate it in the future, I'm sure that's something the garden would be very interested in. Thank you.
I appreciate it, yep. Okay.
More improvement questions
No,
before we
okay,
move
let's
on?
forward, yeah.
Let me just add, one last item, two other questions. All the way at the end of the proposed parking lot, in the northeast corner, we did propose a dumpster enclosure. All right, and I know, one of the questions from, in the letter from the town's
Yes.
professional
Mhm.
planner was in regards to how it's going to be accessing it. They have scheduled it to be done first thing in the morning before the garden's open, before any visitors are here at the garden at the center.
And it was, why was it located there? And I asked you before, and how would, how do people get the garbage there, solid waste? Golf carts, okay. That's so that the location is
Golf carts on site,
is not a
they came to-
logistical problem.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So if I want to go there biking, where can I park my bike? Is there any place for biking, for bikes?
Are there any official bikes parking spots?
Not at this time.
Bring your own luck.
Huh?
Bring your
In
own
a
luck.
tree.
Within a tree, there you
The
go.
whole facility is enclosed and fenced, so you would have to, if you were riding your bike, you would have to come through the gate.
Well, you'd have to come through the front booth. Okay.
Presumably there's spaces where you can park, is there just not the racks like you see at some places, I guess?
Mhm. Understood. Okay, thank you.
Okay, stormwater management, there were some questions raised, why don't you explain that? That's below ground, but why don't you explain how that would work?
We have a comprehensive stormwater management program for the site. We have storm sewer that we're proposing on the north side of the proposed parking lot. We have an inlet over in the corner, we take that for the general inlet, an underground stormwater detention system underneath the parking lot, where the flows are attenuated, and we have additional storm drainage that comes down, and then we did a second rain garden, which gives you additional attenuation for discharging in the northwest corner of the site. The stormwater itself, the basin itself was designed in accordance with NJDEP requirements, and that includes basically stormwater reduction factors. We reduce by 50% the pre-development peak flow for the 2-year storm, 75% peak development for the 10-year storm, and 80% adhering to the peak development rate for the 100-year storm. Basically in regards to water quality treatment, the site, the DEP requires water quality when you have impervious coverage of 1/4 acre. Basically the parking lot is just shy of that, 0.22 acres of impervious surface, so we are exempt basically from providing water quality. And also, our site here is in state planning area 1. Again, based on DEP requirements, state planning area 1 is a fully developed, disturbed site, and recharge requirements are also not required for that particular segment to adhere to.
However, do you expect there will be some infiltration of the water, recharge?
Yes, I mean, basically what we did was, in regards to the rain garden, even though, well, first, we had done perk tests and permeability tests in the location of the underground detention basin system. All right, permeability rates came back at 0.5 inches per hour, which is below the minimum allowed by DEP for recharge. So basically what we did was, within the rain garden section, we designed it to try and have the best of both worlds. We set a bottom so it'll infiltrate as much as the soil
And I believe the details of that are shown on utilities plan sheet 6 of what was filed?
Yes.
Okay, and people should have that.
Can you speak to the, just while we're on the specific topic, the engineers, specifically the request for comment number, item number 1, do you need to, I don't know if you received a copy of that as well?
Yeah.
Specifically, the question about the test pit location, or the, you know, where the locations were done and it was not done in the location where you're proposing the drainage basin.
That's true, and the reason that basically it wasn't done here was because of the test result we had at the previous location, it being so low and basically so minimal, that we didn't believe that it would be needed in this additional location. I had spoken with, the township engineer on that, and she didn't seem to think that it was an issue, she decided to explain it to the board.
Understood, okay, so you had the dialogue with the
Yes,
sisters,
I did.
was just the request to, for you to re-explain it. Okay, thank you, just I wanted to stop you while you were on that item.
And just so I'm clear, so the rain garden, the stormwater, it's picking up runoff from the new large parking area?
Yes.
Okay.
You have
Whatever's
atten-
there
you have-
now is
you have
not changing.
attenuation. Yes, you have attenuation from the underground detention system, and then you comes to the rain garden where you have a second, shot of attenuation and discharge.
And it's your opinion as a professional engineer that that complies with all applicable
Yes, it
requirements? Okay.
Could I ask a question about that, the current parking lot that's, I guess up towards the east there, is that now open drainage or that's a closed drainage system? The existing parking lot,
Asphalt
to
on
the
the
left?
tennis
asphalt, that, yeah, the tennis court,
It's open.
it's open,
It's open,
and,
there's no storm sewer system in that location.
and that's gonna be now collected in this,
Yes.
in this one?
Yes,
Okay, and,
we've gone through, we've intercepted you have basically a high ridge in through here where the contours go in a westerly and an easterly direction. And what we did was, once we regraded this section, we added an inlet and intercepted this flow and brought it back to, the system.
and the perviousness now of the rain garden and everything, is gonna be able to handle all the water and not affect anything in Short Hills Park, or is it gonna do something, it's not, everything is gonna go straight into the ground, into the,
It doesn't go
aquifer?
straight into the ground.
But-
What you have to do is, you have to adhere to what the discharge rate is at the location you're going through. So what happens is, we attenuate a large amount of the flow in the underground system. We discharge that into a basin, and then we have a second round of detention that discharges, and again, decreases the rate of runoff to what's currently there now.
In a heavy rain, there may be some discharge onto the park, is that correct? You're not saying there'll never be any,
No.
Okay.
It discharges what currently goes there.
but it meets the
Like what
criteria.
Firstly goes there now and meets the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
I was just gonna ask a quick question. Hey, do you know what the infiltration capacity is there, or how many inches before we ever get
We
any?
basically assumed that it was the same as the upper section, 0.5 inches per hour. You know, I mean, if more goes through, it's a benefit. If it doesn't go through, it gets detained and it's discharged at grade.
And the question came up before, so you've seen, you saw the engineer's report, you
Yes.
responded on stormwater. You saw the other reports that came out, you mentioned the planner report earlier.
Yes.
Okay. Is your understanding that you can't conform with everything raised in the reports?
Yes.
Okay. And we have another witness on the lighting topic, but that's not
That's
him.
fine, yeah, we can stick on.
If you have questions there, I mean, I think, Ed, were you done?
Um,
Pretty much, or no? Tell us.
Well, we just go through the permits, basically we submitted to, the county planning board and we're exempt from their approval.
And they told you that on the,
Yes.
okay.
And in regards to the soil conservation district, we have received their certification, back in, January.
That's for soil erosion and sediment control plan? Okay. And did I see somewhere that the township has their own? There'll be something you'll need to get from them also, but,
They have a grading permit and a tree removal permit, which we will.
okay. And you- Okay, you'll comply and don't anticipate any problem. Okay,
Grading, drainage, soil erosion, and sediment control. All 4 permits will be, yeah.
I think there are actually just 2 permits, or maybe they're all 1 permit, but different topics.
Fine. Soil conservation district, right, and then the last one is about lighting, and you said that's separate.
Yeah, I think that's the only, other than that, if there are other questions, well, I mean, he can come back also, but.
Sure, does the board at this time have further questions for, no? Mr. Cavallaro, okay, thank you.
Okay, now, okay, we have, give us your name again, you're sworn in already.
Alan Summers.
Okay.
Right, so
And-
Alan is, yeah, go ahead, you can.
Right, you're a registered landscape architect in Pennsylvania, not New Jersey. Your partner is in New Jersey, who signed the plans filed with the board.
Understood.
So you're really here as a fact witness.
Yes.
You've spoken with him, your partner, about all this, and I think there were questions about, well, has the lighting plan been revised by your partner, let's say?
The lighting plan has been revised per comments that we received. I would like to explain the difference between LED and metal halide, which the code does not reflect at this time. So some of the comments that were made had to do with something called, the average between, the ratio between the average and the minimum light qualifications. And the new lighting that is suggested
And why don't we
for the parking lot.
identify that and mark
This is
it?
different than what we have.
Yes,
Okay, so should we call?
Well, they're the same pictures, it's been slightly reconfigured.
okay.
And so
But
the
it's
pictures are
different
the
from-
same. The lighting has been slightly, the locations have been slightly modified to address better coverage.
Okay, so you wanna call this exhibit?
Yeah, we should mark
So
that
mark this
exhibit,
as
yeah, it's not the same,
No,
It's
it's,
not
it's,
correct.
it's not, no major changes, but it's different, and let's
Right.
mark it as A3, and then we can leave a copy, and certainly your engineer, whoever, can verify that it's, we're not trying to resolve the
I
issue
understand it's just
tonight.
different than what we've,
Yeah,
reviewed.
just explain the differences,
So
and
the
we'll leave
difference-
it.
And I just want to be careful here, because as you know,
Yeah.
he's testifying as a fact witness.
Right.
I'm not sure he knows he's testifying as a fact
Well.
witness. And I say that respectfully, so we need to be careful here, because he's
Yeah.
not qualified as an expert.
I
before this
understand,
board.
and that's why, as I said, we're glad to, after he's talked, leave the plan here, and his partner can have any dialogue as appropriate offline with your consultant.
Yeah, well, the difficulty with that is that's not in the record for whoever's in the public to be
Yeah, I
able
understand.
to question, so. just
We're confident that, I mean, if this just came up
walk the
tonight,
factual line.
and we didn't have anybody here, I would say, let's make a condition that we satisfy your consultant, your professional. And that happens all the time, you don't have to come back, so this is a little bit of a hybrid, but that's my suggestion and request as to how to handle this issue.
We had that issue come up here on another matter.
Okay.
Slightly different, not related to
Yeah.
lighting. And we had a court ruling that the delegation of that kind of thing, in that case, to the engineer, and the board not making the determination, invalidated the approvals. So we're sort of sensitive to
Okay,
that. You know,
yeah.
as you are in these boards,
No, I understand, I
you get
understand.
burned once, you
Yeah.
tend to be more cautious than you might otherwise be
Right.
if you haven't been burned. So I just ask that you try to direct the witness to factual
Right.
information that he has, as opposed to expert information, where
I
he's putting
understand.
the lighting and
Right,
why they're doing it that way, but
Yeah.
stay away from the expertise.
okay. You understand that?
I do.
It's a fine line, I appreciate, and we're trying to be, and we're not trying to cut off a lot of later input. I understand what you're saying about delegation. that's a fine line too. It
is a fine
happens all
line,
the
and
time
The
and we
board
all,
thought it was fine, obviously,
Yeah, I
because we
know.
wouldn't have done it.
yeah,
But-
okay. But anyway, let's proceed. You understand how.
My partner has overseen this, and I will factually tell you what has occurred in relation to the new plans. The fixtures, the light fixtures that were suggested are the same. They have been slightly relocated to give a more even expanse of light. The previous lighting that was existing, or that does exist in the parking lot is metal halide. The new lighting is LED. Within your code, you do not yet recognize LED lights. What they do is they give a more even dispersion of the light at a different spectrum, which is actually lower foot candles. So though often people think LED lights are brighter, the foot candles are actually less. It's just clearer light and you perceive better. So with that being said, the request or the comment that was made was if this ratio, the average ratio between the minimum and average light could be at 5. Typically, anything under 10 is fine. We have it at 8 in the new parking lot. 8.18 and 8.47 depending on the drive or the parking lot. The difference between 5 and 8 is really negligible. If you require 5, we will meet 5 and submit a new plan to you. It will require additional fixtures, additional posts. 8, the amount of foot candles where it falls off is still very sufficient for health, safety, and welfare. So even in the darkest areas, it's very clear wayfinding.
And you're confident that your partner, who would say the same thing in dialogue with the engineer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And did your partner have dialogue directly with the engineer regarding the comments that
Yes,
have been
and he
provided?
signed
Okay, and that was that's what created these changes here?
Yes.
And did she have the opportunity to review, were these plans submitted in advance of this meeting?
No, they
So
didn't
the
have time.
calculations here are ones that we do have not seen? Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you, you just talked about like the 5 to 10 ratio, but what about the foot candles, on average below?
Yeah.
Can you provide what that
Foot
number is?
candles on average are 2. Well, they range from 2.7 to 3 depending on which area it is. So it's well within the range of the code.
Does our code not
The
require
range is
between
not
0.5 and
0.5 to 1. The range in our code is 0.5 to 1.
0.5 to 1
Zero
is
point-
our code. No, is our code, that's the range.
Yeah.
On the average.
Average.
Yes.
Right.
And you said how much
You
is
just
We
said-
hit 0.41 to 2.7. So it's a little brighter in the exposed driving parking.
which is much higher
Twice
than
as-
what, yes.
1. Right.
Right.
And you're saying that could be adjusted if necessary, but your partner doesn't see the need for that, but it could be changed if requested.
Okay. Thank you, okay.
Let me just,
Yeah.
if I might, I just wanna make sure I understand the testimony. The testimony is that the current plan that is on the board marked as A3, that the range of foot candles on that current plan, A3, is between 0.41 and 2.7 foot candles, is that correct?
Is that what it says?
As an average.
As an average.
Okay.
And that the ordinance is 0.5 to 1, 1.0. Is that correct? So therefore, these are,
They don't meet.
they're brighter. I was gonna say significantly brighter, but I don't know if I can verbalize it in that way, but they are brighter, is that? Okay, so then the board's gotta deal with that issue because they,
And I would say that the light fixture that has been selected is dark sky compliant, extreme cutoff, so that light is not leaking out beyond the location. it doesn't go out into the landscape, it stays very clearly.
Understood that it doesn't go out. I believe the question that the engineer had raised was that you have something that is, on average brighter, and then where you're talking about it not leaking, it would be darker, and the concern of that bright to dark contrast. And safety associated with it. So I don't know that you can give the testimony or can tell us how the revised.
It's, as I said, it used to be higher.
Okay.
And when we went to our lighting consultant and the new plan was drawn up, they brought it down from, I believe it was 12 to 8.
Okay.
And the opinion of the lighting consultant was, the engineer was, the difference between 8 and 5 is very negligible.
Understood.
And it would be safe.
So you then seeking, and I'm not sure if it's a waiver or variance, it may be a waiver. Are you seeking a waiver from the requirement?
If deemed to be required, yes, and my notice did cover that possibility.
I also have a question. I'm looking at Martha Callahan's memorandum of January 24. In paragraph 4, Lisa asks, is it possible to, I'm sorry, she says all light fixtures should be shielded to prevent glare.
Yes.
Are they shown as shielded there?
They are, the new technology is that the light doesn't need a shield per se. The LEDs are in the fixture, in the head of the fixture, and that extreme cutoff that I mentioned has to do with the angle of the light shining down. So shielding is for the old fixtures where the bulb hung down and your eye would see it, and so you would require a shield because of the precision of the LEDs and the refraction. The angle of the light is such that you don't need those actual shields.
What about her comment that the light fixture should be operated by photocell or on a timer?
So I would address that to Greenwood Gardens. The lights are on only for special effects. The garden is not open every night, so they will be manually controlling the lights, and it is within a very small window of the evening.
We could agree to a condition to that effect, that we only be on when needed for safety reasons.
Great.
Which is why it's the timer, you have a business, you have normal hours and timer works, but this would be, as you said, manually controlled. So we have no problem with
And
the
can we
condition.
ask Ms. O'Neill to provide testimony on what the hours of operation are? Or whomever
Or the
is the most
special
appropriate.
events.
Yeah, or on special events. Can we have some testimony about
Sure,
what the standard hours are? and
Why don't you
the
come
special
back up and respond to that while we're on the subject?
Thank you.
So standard hours during season, which is May through November, are 10 to 5. And when we do events, so outdoor events happen generally, in a smaller time frame than that because of weather. So say from, May till generally October or so. If we have an evening event, it, I think, ends by 8 o'clock. Is that right? Yeah, 8 o'clock, yeah.
So your request would be to have lighting be eliminated until 1 hour after close to it? What on a traditional
Well,
basis?
yeah,
You're
that's a
saying it
good
closes at 5
question.
p.m.
What would you say?
Why don't you come up and
Be sworn in, 'cause I-
tell
yeah,
us who
yeah.
you are too, just to
Thank you.
make it official.
I do. Richard Murphy.
And first, tell us who you are and what your affiliation is with Greenwood Gardens.
So my title is Deputy Director. I've been with Greenwood Gardens for 15 years. I'm the longest tenured employee. I oversee the property basically as a Director of Operations. So I've overseen all of the events and programming and visitation that occurs on site. To answer your question, typically, we don't have a large number of evening events. We may expand that offering with the additional parking, which would really help us do that. But we don't typically run later than 9 o'clock at night. So our lighting is only on, and because they're outdoor evening events, we usually have those in the summer months, spring and summer and fall. It generally gets too cold to have them outside. We don't have a large enough interior space to do a lot of larger entertaining in the evening. So we're relegated to doing that outdoor in a space, which is what people generally want anyway. So the short answer is generally our lighting is turned on for the evening events, and we manually shut it off as soon as everyone is off the property. But they are on a timer, so if that were on a solar timer, so if that were a requirement, we could leave
And you're
them on.
speaking to the existing?
Yes, the existing lighting, not
You're
the
not
new
changing.
lighting. Exactly.
So you propose the same thing for this?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the timer hours? How does that work?
So it's works by light.
Okay.
So once daylight breaks, they shut off automatically. And just for sustainability purposes, we don't like to leave. There's an enormous amount of lights. It's a big draw on our utility bill. So we don't typically leave them on when they're not necessary, because there's no one on site after hours.
Can you just said when dawn breaks, they go off?
Yeah.
So
So
they're
if
on all
we
night?
have the option to shut them manually, if we do not, they're on a solar timer. So basically, when the light comes up, they turn off. When it gets dark, they'll turn on. Otherwise, we manually keep them off, so they're not burning
So they're
through the
on
night.
all night long.
All night.
Yeah, otherwise, they'd be on all night long.
Well,
Which
you
would
can
make
That's what
sense.
you're saying.
Yes.
So that doesn't happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Wait, say that
they,
again?
they override what the.
We
natural
override
station is.
what the solar power is right now. They're turned on by solar, so
Right, but
turned
they're
off.
So they're turned on every night by solar unless you turn
Once
them
it gets
on?
once it gets dark,
Right.
they come on automatically.
Automatically every
Yes,
night.
unless we manually shut them off. So we manually keep them off for the majority of the time. So we operate them manually, basically. That's the short answer.
And so, are you providing testimony of what time you manually turn them off?
Yes, for special events. So they're always
First a
off.
traditional day.
Yes, traditional day, they're off. So right now, we're in the off season, it's just our staff. We use the lighting that's on the house, and that's manual as well. And the lighting that we're talking about is the lighting that runs a quarter mile up our driveway into our parking area,
Right.
which generally we don't use except for special events.
Why do you have them automatically on? Why do you even have?
So
them
that's the way they were set up when they were originally designed, so it would be, kind of thoughtless if we were gonna operate them like that, but we internally made a decision to shut them off.
So if I might,
Mhm.
if you shut them off manually,
Mhm.
then that overrides the.
Overrides the
photoelectric
solar, yes,
cell.
the photoelectric cell, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
But these are new lights, they don't have to be on a solar system,
No, they don't have to.
correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can set them up however the board prefers,
Yeah.
I take it. Other than you need them for safety when people are there.
Yes.
So they could be set up manually.
Yes.
Mhm.
So what is the color temperature of those lights? In the existing lights and the new lights, because I didn't see that
We'll
here.
just, for a second.
About 3,000 Kelvin. 3,000 Kelvin?
In both the existing and the new.
Well, the other ones are the metal halides are warmer, I don't know the exact number.
So you're going to have two different.
But they're similar. I mean, it's not gonna be dramatically different, but they're gonna be slightly different. And what we've tried to do is have a blend. So we've taken some of the old lights that are being relocated because of the drive and introducing them on the edge and then transitioning to the LEDs. The LEDs used to be very bright white, disturbingly white, and they've gotten much better now at changing the color temperature, so they're not so bright white and more what you consider warmer, more yellow, so it's more pleasing to the eye.
And back to the timing, I'm not sure if whatever makes sense, and what makes sense to me is an hour after an event is the shut-off time. if nobody's there, as you heard, there's no reason for them to be on, and they have incentive. They don't want to be paying an electric bill for lights that aren't
that's
needed.
great, yes.
So I would suggest that as a, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
As a
that's appropriate.
commitment, condition, however you want, but as a shut-off, so they're not on all night.
So just to reiterate, you're willing to, happy to comply with if we were to make a condition of 1 hour after closing?
Yes, I'm
and-
proposing
and
that
1
and
hour
saying that
after an
would be,
event with it,
that
that
seems to
would
address your
be-
concern. We have no objection to that condition.
Thank you. Okay, captured that. Thank you. Okay.
I think we've covered everything. If there's something I've missed that people are, as I read the reports, they were, other than the planner and your engineer, they were the main substantive ones. We did see the fire chief wanted designation of fire lanes. That's fine. They were designated before. He has a comment about buildings where there's no new buildings, so I think that comment is not applicable, shall we say. But if something else comes up, we certainly will comply.
No, I have some question about the plants, the trees.
Excuse me?
The trees, because I don't see
Tree-
here
tree
the
removal
work,
plants?
which ones are going to be native plants or non-native from New Jersey. So, native plants.
Are they designated on the plans we've submitted?
Well, there are names, but yeah,
Yeah, names just doesn't say.
I'm not an expert on trees, so.
Yeah, well, our tree
I guess we need,
forester, he
yeah.
he requested a tree removal and restoration.
we said we would comply with that.
Yes, we'll
yeah.
comply with
Yeah.
that.
So is that it?
The native plants are not called out specifically as native plants, but there is a large proportion of the forest is native. If you like, I can put a little N on another plant schedule or use it.
Okay.
So let you know which ones are native.
So we can see which one. So what percentage of the plants, the new trees are going to be native?
98%?
Okay. Okay.
Vast majority, appreciate it.
So if I may have a moment about the landscape, this plan that is A2, exhibit A2, shows in lighter green all the existing trees. And as Ed mentioned, we took great pains to design this parking lot to shoehorn it in, not only with the existing impervious surface areas, but to protect the mature trees that are there. We're even going so far as to write a specific specification for tree protection for this project when it goes out to the general contractor. So these large trees that you see here, you can see that we particularly did not put parking under here, that we turned it into another roadway. These are specimen trees that we are really doing our best to protect and save. The other trees all along here are also, it's a wooded area. And these are all the new trees that were added, even though we're doing our best to protect what's there to introduce the next generation of native specimen trees. So at this time, we've already added an additional 36 trees in what's here while we're removing hardly any.
And that's shown on sheet 12 of the plans that were filed and it does have the
It has the plan schedule.
plan names, et cetera, I guess. The request, and we'll agree to it, is, well, if there are any that are not native, they'll be changed to the satisfaction of whoever will be appropriate to. Well,
Let's interject there.
Okay.
This is an ornamental garden. It's a historical site. The part of ornamental horticulture is appropriate for new planting as well as native plants. There's a botanical lineage here. And so while we are very conscious of introducing native plants for ecological benefit and also for just native beauty, it's also important not to ignore the history of ornamental horticulture, particularly in a place like Greenwood Gardens. We do a lot of work with historic sites, botanical gardens, and arboretums throughout the country, and this is a topic that comes up. So it's important to be mindful of the long tradition and the benefits that non-native plants give as well as native plants. So I don't want to say everything will be native because that's inaccurate. But we are conscious of certainly being mindful of planting native plants.
So I stand corrected, and I suggest a condition that we will give the information to the appropriate person and discuss adjustments as appropriate, if appropriate. Is that okay? I mean, that's,
Well,
I'm having a problem here. There are too many conditions, I don't even know how one would draw a resolution here. We have a town forester,
Right.
so the matter of the trees can be referred back to the town forester, and the applicant apparently would be bound by the direction of the town forester, but I'm hung up on the first sentence of paragraph 4 of the township engineer's memorandum. I don't know how we resolve that at this meeting. She's not here tonight. And we have, she says, quote, "Is it possible to reduce the uniformity levels?" She doesn't say to what level, by adding fixtures and reducing the mounting height.
But isn't the testimony that they've done that these plans came revised?
Well, but we don't know whether they're done to her satisfaction. That's the problem. And she's not here, so we can't take testimony from her. I don't know how you draw that resolution in that condition.
I think it's simple. You just say, she will address the issue. I mean,
That doesn't.
and we have a report here, and she's not here, and that's not our fault. But we're glad to take another report that says, I talked to the applicant's professionals, and they resolved my concern, my question. I don't think that's unusual to do it that way. I mean, I don't think it's a major substantive point. There's no argument that we don't comply with something. It strikes me as I read this, that's a preference, and that's fine. We want to work with the town, but.
Well, this is, and to be clear, this is all outside of where our ordinance was, because the LED as proposed is not, as of today,
Yeah.
not currently permitted.
That's right.
So we're sort of all outside of the realm of what the code, in the letter of the code. They have also provided testimony of willingness to make lighting not an issue, even though within 1 hour of closing, but there's still.
Well, that's a different issue. We're talking about the brightness here.
Right.
True, but I don't know that our engineer made it a condition. She was asking if it could be done, which they did. That's the first thing. The second thing is, they don't use it very much, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be used very much. So I don't know if we're making a mountain out of a molehill with respect
And
to
there's
the lighting.
one residential property nearby.
Well, they consented to this application.
Where is the residential property vis-a-vis the lighting?
This residential property.
I guess, because otherwise you're surrounded by Short Hills Park. I mean, there's.
Right, and the
And
reservation.
the lighting,
That's the problem. The light for the separation.
Exactly, for that wild.
No
this is
residential,
this is all heavily wooded and planted, so the light isn't actually reaching that property, that house. And it has zero cutoff.
Yeah,
And
that's the Blanchards whose family had this. They were here 10 years ago. They consented to this. And just so you know, on that one point I have mentioned, the prior approval required a reciprocal easement agreement, which was approved, I forget, by your attorney at the time, because here, but, it's hard to see, but there's a lot line there. This lot with the house is owned privately. They're on the board of Greenwood, and actually last time we even got an appraisal done at the recommendation of one of my partners to make sure they weren't getting a benefit. Appraisal showed that Greenwood was benefiting from, but you see the parking is on the other property, so will need to modify, as a condition, the reciprocal easement agreement that the private owners are consenting to this access, use of part of their property. So they're on board with this. They're a party to this. They agreed, they consented to the application. It's in the paperwork that we filed. So, you know, I think that will, and we can get, as far as the lighting, back to the lighting, so they're an interested party. They've signed off on this, so.
Well, I'm also concerned about the reservation on the other side.
Excuse me?
The reservation also is a problem with so much light. That's the natural life of that area, and having so much light can affect that.
But there is landscaping in between as well, but we're glad to talk to anybody about that.
This is all wooded with mature trees.
No, I'm talking above, between the other.
No, I'm talking about this, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know that, yeah.
South side's reservation. The north and east side is the park. South side, these are mature trees and a wooded slope. The grade, this is the ridge, so the grade is sloping down this way and down this way. With that, with these mature trees on the edge and with the zero cutoff, there's very little light going beyond the parking area that you see. By the time the tree canopy and the tree branches in the winter have blocked it, and actually there's no events in the winter anyway, but when the tree canopy has blocked the light, it's not leaking into the reservation.
And may I add, it doesn't seem as if these lights are gonna be on much an hour past sundown, and even an event in the summer, so I don't really think you're affecting wildlife. Everything will be shut down by the time the night owls come out.
That's true, and actually LEDs do not attract moths or
Right.
other nocturnal animals, unlike metal halide or incandescent lights.
Right.
I do think we should have, if we're going to approve it, a condition that they not be operated on a timer.
Right, and it says that on here.
We agreed an hour after
Yeah.
the end of any event,
Right,
when,
but they also
because then you need them for safety.
And not be on a timer.
Right.
That's fine.
I think Rich spoke to that.
Well, if it's timed for 1 hour after closing,
They shouldn't be on a timer.
you're saying the solar
At all,
timer. or
yeah.
any
On the solar.
Solar cell.
Right, doesn't have to be a
Right,
solar
That's
timer, it could
different
be
than
a
Right.
digital timer.
Right,
in
that's
which-
true. Yeah,
Well-
on the solar.
That would turn them on, though, it's just would turn them off.
Yeah.
Did I
we're
miss
talking
something?
about turn on.
There's a solar cell which can be on the light fixture itself. That's different than a timer. A timer can be a separate astrological timer in a box, and so the solar cell can be connected to the timer. They don't have that. All they have is the solar cell, which, as you said, acts kind of like a timer in that it turns it on and only turns it off depending on
Right.
what it's receiving. What they're doing is, and what you're suggesting is not have a solar cell at all.
Correct.
I think what would be better is, they can have a solar cell, but they're required to turn it off an hour after any event. So it's not on at night, which they.
And what's the point of the solar?
Thank
Well, in
you. That
case
was my
someone is
question.
running around doing something this is a management issue, but if someone is dealing with something and they don't have the opportunity to turn on the lights everywhere, otherwise it's completely manual and on the management. But if the management agrees that, yes, they'll turn it on and turn it off, that's not my decision, but I could see that it would be to their benefit to still have the solar cell so the lights can come on, as long as they're obligated to turn them off after an hour after the event is over.
And I believe they're turning it off from their, fixtures now. So they
Yes.
are already complying with that situation.
Exactly.
So,
So I think
yeah,
if
that's what you're hearing.
if I'm correct, your concern was that these things were going on and staying on all night.
Well, that they're yes.
Yeah.
And if they don't have time to turn them on, they may not have time to turn them off. I mean, I don't know, I'm not quite, I don't really understand why they need it, is really my point. But
Because it's one less thing to worry about. I mean, when the lights come on and they're on and they may be busy helping organize the event and the lights come on, but then they're gonna be there cleaning up, making sure everybody's out, and then they just turn it off.
Okay.
That's how I could see it working. That makes sense.
And a timer, you'd have them on
listen,
every
I just-
evening
I just-
anyway, when you.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't get it, but, you know,
Okay.
there are other people who
If there's an event, all of the staff may be out
I
in the
understand
field,
what
right?
they're saying.
Yeah.
I don't buy it, that's all.
I
somebody who
buy
does
it,
a lot
and
of
it
events,
makes
I
sense
buy
to
it.
me.
Yeah. Let's buy it.
All right, thank you. We'll also have a discussion at the right time among the board of whether or not we buy it.
We're not paying for it.
I think I've covered everything. If there's anything I missed, please let me know. But back to the trees, we will get a tree permit, we'll deal with your forester, we'll, so that'll all we'll do that. We're not trying to,
Absolutely, and I just want to make sure the board has had the opportunity to ask any other questions as we page through the planner's questions, or thank you, Joe, for bringing to light the engineer's question. And any other additional questions for, at this point, any of the witnesses from the board? Okay, I now open up for comments from the board on this application.
Seems to me like we should grant it based on whatever conditions we grant.
Maybe we need to,
Well,
before
to
we go on,
public,
let's open to the
I
public.
don't believe there are any members of the public
There
here.
was one.
there was somebody.
But that's all right, we
Would
opened it
anybody from the
before
public like to make any comments or questions at this time? Yeah? Okay. Now, I'd like to turn it over to you to run us through everything we just heard. Well,
The application is for preliminary, I know they've referred to amended site plan approval, but as I understand, the application was actually for preliminary and
And
final
final.
site plan approval, recognizing that they were here some time ago for the original approval. The board granted the EIS waiver. There are two waivers that the board has to deal with, I think. One being the request to utilize LED lighting, which is not permitted under our ordinance at this time. And the second one, and it's not particularly clear, I don't think in the memorandum, but I thought it was clear in the testimony, that the proposed lighting exceeds the maximum foot candles that are permitted under our ordinance. So we need to deal with that issue. Martha's issue is related to that, that is the township engineer's issue is related to that, talking about uniformity, but she, as I read the memo, and I just saw this tonight, she did not deal with the fact that they were exceeding the ordinance requirements, I don't think. But I think the testimony was clear that they are, so we need to deal with that issue. And I believe that that's a waiver,
Yes.
it's here,
is
it's a
that right?
waiver.
Yeah, okay. Once we get through that, if the board is inclined to grant the preliminary and final site plan approval, in addition to the usual conditions that we insert in the resolutions, I have noted the following, and certainly am open to ones that I may have missed during the course of the discussions. With regard to the parking lot lights themselves, they will be on only during, they will be turned off 1 hour after closing and after any special event. The applicant will comply with all of the recommendations set forth in the various reports, the forester, the fire marshal, the engineer, and the planner. The applicant will submit information to the forester regarding the native plants. The testimony was that I believe 98% of the plants are native plants. And the applicant agreed to submit further information to the forester. I didn't get the forester's report, so I'm not exactly sure what you requested. Okay, tree removal and tree restoration plan will be required, that's part of the general law. I think that's all I had. If the board has any, we can certainly add those to any approval if the board is so inclined.
Great, I welcome discussion and debate, as it were, regarding
I
the
don't
lighting.
see
feel you-
that
yeah.
the resolution, the proposed resolution with those conditions deals with the issue that I raised.
And so you raised the issue that Martha had provided commentary, which, you know,
Commentary
we may
and
say is
concern
vague
with
because
the
we
re-
don't have numbers.
The
to-
minimum and maximum ratios, which she says are high, which indicates that there could be areas of high contrast between light and dark. Now, the testimony, as I heard it, is that they've reduced the brightness. But how much have they reduced it, and is it satisfactory to her? We don't know. She's not here. And I don't know how you deal with that in a condition.
We agreed to comply with all the reports and including
Right.
giving her more information if need be.
Comments. Saying it was just based on discussions with outside people.
Well, I understand, but I don't know how you deal with that.
I can't say I know either. But I guess what we can base the decision on is, yes, we may have some concern about the amount of light and the contrast, but as we know, following dusk and the hours of Greenwood Gardens operation based on testimony, the seasons of the year during which it's open, and the hours, I think we would make our decision.
You're suggesting that her concern is not significant because the lights won't be on very much. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And we've submitted a revised plan, which she hasn't seen
So
yet,
that's
so.
the issue.
Well,
That's
no,
the
no,
issue.
but
We didn't see it.
I'm back to saying I think that's a standard type of event in these types of proceedings, the revised plan, subject to her saying.
Yeah, we're not benefiting from her response to the
Right.
revisions. So-
We're saying if she doesn't have a favorable response, then I guess we will have to come back, but we'd hope that,
Well, but that's the problem.
That's, yeah, once we
If you-
approve it.
Once you have a resolution, how do you come back?
well, if you don't meet the condition, you come back. That's
Well, I
what
don't know
always
what the
happens.
condition is. I haven't heard
The
anybody.
events are finished by 9 PM.
Yes, when there are events and they're finished by 9
Well,
PM in
it-
summer, yeah.
Well,
which
they
it's
don't
like-
have events after October,
Right,
outside
right.
events. So you're essentially saying till October, they're done by 9,
Yes,
right?
the lights will be off by 10 then.
The lights
At
will be
latest.
off by 10. So from May to October,
On special occasions.
on special occasions.
That's what I heard.
So, right, so the question really is,
Is that reasonable, I guess, is that for us to decide?
right, I mean, I look at it as it's relatively de minimis. There's just not a lot out there. It's light until 9 o'clock in June. You walk your way out the calendar and it's just not a lot.
And there's not that many, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
Right, there's just not
And there's
that.
not that many events, this is not a nightly affair, this is,
It's a public garden that is seen during the day for the.
right,
Yeah.
so,
But we're only concerned with the events, that's what we're concerned
Exact-
about.
and there's
We're
not-
concerned about the events at night that happen where the lights are going to be on for any length of time.
Right.
That's really the interest of the board.
and the way that
always
they
with
conduct,
respect to the lighting.
and they conduct themselves now by turning off the lights manually, so.
Right, but that's not the issue so much.
No, but-
as-
The issue is the
Right.
brightness.
To get back to the.
So, yeah, because we have, as part of the environmental commission, we have the same issue, when we talk with Elizabeth, but, that come out too, that is too bright. So it's not just the engineer, it's also the environmental commission.
But now it's been revised since what we
But we-
received, but
we
we don't
don't
know
s- we
how
don't
much,
know.
yeah.
And that standard of 10 that I had mentioned, we're at 8, so we're below
Right.
any kind of acceptable standard. So we did make a real effort to lower.
So you had been, you're
that
saying at
concern.
12 and then you went down
Right.
to 8?
We went down to 8.
So there's
10
some
is
testimony
kind of
showing
acceptable
response to your
standard.
question.
So, and then subsequently there was this idea of 5, and so the, as I say, the difference between 5 and 8 is really negligible.
So you said that it was 10 and now it's 8?
No,
The average was
No,
12.
it was 12 prior.
No, at least it's not what I have here.
Are we talking about foot candles?
No.
No,
We're
I'm
talking
sorry.
about something else.
The average minimum ratio.
Of what to what?
So that's
Uniform.
derived from brightest part to darkest part.
All right, so it's the contrast, so to
Right,
speak,
the contrast that we're speaking of.
that Martha's referring to.
Right, but she did not give a direct number, she just said she'd like it to be lowered. And so we lowered, what I'm saying is we lowered it from what was 12 down to 8, I think as an average.
And that's on the revised plan that's been
Generally speaking,
submitted
there's
tonight.
fluctuations there depending on which parking lot you're in, but within a very narrow range.
Okay.
You know.
I think one other factor, if I might, that the board needs to consider, I think, I don't know if Mr. Hall mentioned it or someone mentioned it. The parking lot is isolated in the sense of serving this use. The house that's there, which is, they have consented to the application.
Yes, correct.
They're obviously not here tonight, and they would be the ones, I would assume, who would be most directly affected. I'm not sure anyone else would be affected if I'm understanding the plans themselves, is that correct?
My understanding is surrounded
There's no
by
other
park,
residents.
except on the entrance drive, which is a long ways away.
Right, so the only people who would be directly affected would be the residents that's already there, who
Or
have
future-
consented to
or
this
future-
or future residents there, right. But future residents,
know about it.
they'll know about it because they'll see it. Okay, I just wanted to raise that issue.
Yeah, it's considered on-site for purposes of this application. It's not a neighboring property.
Correct.
Okay.
Just to sort of pick it up again, I know some of the metal halides are being reutilized. Will those be shielded? Or do they need shielding for any purposes, or?
No, they're extreme cutoff as well.
As well.
They always were. We were always conscious of dark sky compliance and extreme cutoff, and that's what we
Okay, so
do.
everything, okay with that, perfect, thanks.
Yes.
I guess my question is, because you keep saying we're gonna comply with everything in the notes, but then she says light fixtures should be shielded, but then the but then what I'm hearing is they don't need to be shielded, so I just wanna make sure we're not just,
Shielded needs to be defined, I would say.
okay, I'm just
We're
saying.
willing
hearing
to
different
discuss that
things,
further with
so-
your engineer, but we think we comply already from what I'm hearing.
Okay,
If she's not persuaded that with the argument, then obviously that would be an open issue. We'd shield it.
I think what we'll do is we will set forth as a condition the generic statements that have been made here, that the applicant agrees to comply with the requirements set forth in the reports. And I think that's broad enough to protect us,
and if we need to
because
go
if
back
if the
and visit it.
particular expert's not satisfied that they've satisfied that condition, then they can't go forward,
Okay,
or the applicant can't go forward.
okay. Thank you for mediating. So if that is the case, are those all the conditions, or was there one more that you asked us to discuss, or you just brought up the?
No, well, the other one was the LED, we need to grant if the board is inclined to approve the application, it would be to grant a waiver to utilize the LED lighting, to grant the waiver as it relates to foot candles, I don't have
Like
the numbers
exceeding
here,
the-
but it exceeds the foot candles that are set forth in the ordinance, and then the specific conditions I talked about, including among them, I won't go through them all, but including among them the fact that they will comply with the professional reports, and we'll list each of those reports.
Okay, do we need to take a waiver request voice vote?
No, you can do it all, you can
We
do
can
it
do
all
that
at
all
once, I think. I don't think we need to do each one individually.
Okay. So that said,
Anyone willing to make a motion?
Yes, I would make a motion to accept this application,
given the waiver request.
given the
and
waiver
conditions.
request and everything we spoke of as conditions.
I'll second it. Okay.
Cheryl Burstein.
Yes.
Diane Aglo.
Yes.
Kathleen Halpert.
Yes.
Maureen Joshua Pietro.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
No.
Mark Matzel.
Yes.
Tracy Goldenberg.
Yes.
Miriam Salerno.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Before we adjourn, apologies, board, before we adjourn the,
I have to go. Give a gavel there.
before we adjourn the meeting, may I have the floor? I just wanted to bring up as an item for public, for just like an additional item, that, as brought up tonight, the LED issue that we have in our ordinance is that we do not permit LED, although that is much more sustainable and acceptable. What we were in the process of doing is looking to some of our neighboring communities and talking with planners, talking with the Environmental Commission about the best way to go about revising the language. So we are considering doing something nearer term to revise it to permit LED lighting. And then also with Martha, we have initiated conversations about a longer term, maybe an overhaul of the lighting ordinance in general, so that hopefully we can minimize the number of times we have to deal with this issue. We can be much more clear to applicants, and we also can know whether or not it complies, so we're not as collectively confused. So more to come, but I wanted to introduce the idea that you will be receiving, hopefully in the coming weeks, draft language to allow LED, so we can avoid these waiver requests going forward. Thank you. With that said, a motion to
Move to adjourn. Second.
good night.
Right.
I have to say, I was pretty, it was appalling that they didn't have appropriate witness, expert witness.
Yeah. Those are
I mean, between that and